Hi everyone, welcome back. This is the second episode in my series on the junk rig conversion of Moira, which I did over the winter. In this episode I'm going to show you how I made my mast and the spars, and I'm also going to show you the process I went through to design and work out the quantities for all the rigging that's required, all the rope work. One of the aspects of this project I've really enjoyed is the chance to design and fabricate various fittings and features on the rigging, and also a chance to dig up my technical drawing skills that I learned a long time ago and put them to some good use. Hope you enjoy the video. This is Moira's new mast, which is a 7-meter street lamp pole that I got from a company called Street Lighting, who are based in Scotland. And it's an aluminium pole, which is at the bottom is about, it's 150 millimeters, that's about 6-inch diameter, and then it's the same diameter for the first 2.8 meters, and then it tapers at the top down to 74 millimeters. I've painted it in it's actually an auto epoxy undercoat. It's a very thin 2-part epoxy paint which just goes on really nicely and seems to adhere to the metal very well and gives a nice finish. So I've just left it with that finish without any top coat. The base of the mast, well, this part that's unpainted from here down, that's about 10% of the overall length of the mast, and that is the part that slots into a tube on the boat, which is just underneath that carrier bag is an aluminium tube where the mast is mounted. And there's a hole drilled through there, which bolts through the other tube to stop the mast falling out if I was ever to turn turtle. That's my masthead light and antenna cables coming down. At the top of the mast I've made an aluminium masthead fitting. I'll just go around the other side in the sunlight, which I got the design off the Junk Rig Association from one of Arne's documents, and it's a piece of aluminium tubing with a round cap welded on, and then there are these tangs for the various halyards and other lines, and that's worked very well. On the top I've got a masthead light and then an extra aluminium bracket for the VHF antenna, which plugs in there. These are all the different lines wrapped around. So that is my mast. So now I'll show you my spars, which are all made of aluminium tubing. For the yard and the boom I used this, which is 40mm diameter, 3mm wall thickness tubing, and for all the battens I used this one, which is 22mm 3.2 wall thickness, or 7/8 10 SWG for the imperial measurers. And probably I could have used a slightly thinner wall tubing for the battens, would have saved a bit of weight. On the yard and the boom I made these are actually teak plugs that I turned on the lathe just to plug the end there and to provide a little eye there for lashing on, and I also put these eye bolts in both at each end. and then the yard, which changes its position relative to the mast depending on how big a reef you have in. I basically used some camping mat foam and then covered that in what essentially is electrical heat shrink tubing, which seems to be fairly robust. It's withstood the lashing lines going around it, and that's been good padding. At this point I'm going to take you back to my workshop in February and show you how I did the padding for the battens. Good, well, welcome to the workshop, the sail loft. And I've made a lot of progress. I've now finished sewing the sail, and I'm just doing some work on the battens. The battens are what divide the sail up into its different sections. 7 panels, 6 battens, and the battens go through batten pockets in the sail, like this pocket here, and that rests against the mast. So in order to pad, because the battens are aluminium, then I'm just putting some foam padding on the section of the batten that will be touching the mast, partly so it doesn't bang and make a lot of noise when you're sailing along, and partly to protect wear of these batten pockets, so they're not being pressed between 2 bits of metal, but there's some nice foam padding. And I'm using some 6mm thick sleeping mat to put around the battens, and then I'm got this shrink wrap, then heat shrink tubing, which goes over that layer of foam just to hold it in place. So I'll just get the next one in. I've already put a mark on the batten which corresponds to this end of the batten pocket, and this is the area where the mast will be touching the sail, so that's the area that I want to pad. And okay, so I'll just draw a line on top of the batten there, and then cut out a piece of foam. I've already put marks on the table where the cut should be, so I can just makes it quicker. That's my piece of foam. It's going to wrap around there, and I'm using a bit of contact adhesive to hold it in place whilst I put the heat shrink on top. Okay, so we just need to leave that to dry. Pretty paranoid about spoiling the sail with any glues or pens, or melting it with anything hot, so I'm always pretty quick to clear up any spills. So whilst that's curing, I just need to cut a piece of the shrink wrap, keep the heat shrink tubing to length. And just going to put that over the end of the batten so it's ready to go once the foam's been stuck on. It's getting there. Yeah, it's gone on nicely. Slide the heat shrink over it. And then you just give that blast with the heat gun. Pretty satisfying the way it shrinks down and gives you such a nice snug fit. And there we go. So that's going to lie inside this. This is the batten pocket that goes all the way down the sail to the leech, back end of the sail, and you can see it starts there. And there's a small gap here, and then this one is a bit wider to accommodate the extra width, the extra diameter of the padding, whereas this one is a bit narrower because it just has to take the tube on its own. And then the mast will be resting on the sail will be resting on the mast around this area here, which is where the padding is, like that. Great, so that was showing you how I did the padding for the spars. Let's head back outside again. Padding for the attachment of the halyard onto the yard. I made this stainless steel fitting, which is made in two halves and shaped around an offcut of the tubing, and then riveted on. There's another saddle here which is for the that's the yard hauling parrel, and then the front end of it also has a teak plug and an eye bolt there. For the battens, initially I put little wooden plugs in the end here as well, but they weren't very practical, and then I had smaller eye bolts, M6 eye bolts coming down to attach the sheets and so on onto, but I found that as they pulled on those that would rotate the batten, so I changed it for these fittings. This is a bit of Delrin rod, which is quite a good engineering plastic that you can thread, and I've threaded it for an M6 eye bolt, and then it's held in with a little machine screw there, M5 I think it is, and then I've similar got the camping mat foam padding here with some clear heat shrink covering that up. That saddle there is for the aft attachment of the batten parrels, and then another Delrin plug at the front with an eye bolt. This one actually has a block on it as well, because this is the number 2 batten, which has the throat hauling parrel attached to it, which goes through that block and down to the deck. So those are my spars. Like I say, they've functioned well, had some good winds and so on, and the yard has remained nice and straight, hasn't bent under the strain. I think my battens could have been a slightly lighter weight, probably would have just made it easier to pull the sail up. Okay, so the last section of this video is looking at the rigging, how the sail is attached to the mast, and then the design of the main sheet. And I'm going to start with the main sheet, and there's a big difference between the main sheet on a junk rig and on a Bermudan rig. On the junk rig, the main sheet is attached separately to the boom, and then 5 of the 6 battens. The top batten is left out. And the aim of the design of the main sheet arrangement is to transmit more force to the battens higher up the sail to try to decrease the amount of twist in the sail. And these fractions of F, which is the force that you're pulling on the main sheet with, shows you how that works out. I hope this gives you an idea of what's happening as I understand it. So the main sheet is I think it's an 8 or 10 mil piece of rope, and then the sheetlets are 6mm braid, and I've used quite a few low friction rings as well as blocks to set up this arrangement. The sail is held onto the mast by batten parrels, which are these white webbing slings that go around the mast, and the sail hangs off the port side of the mast at all times. And those are the batten parrels. Then the Hong Kong parrels are diagonal lines that go from the front of one batten down to the batten below, and they help to decrease some of the diagonal creases you get in each panel of the sail. And then there is an arrangement of lazy jacks, so that when you drop the sail, each section of the sail, each panel and the battens just drops into the lazy jacks, and that is a fundamental part of the reefing process. There are several other lines, 2 of which are the luff hauling parrel and the yard hauling parrel, which help to set the position of the sail relative to the mast. I made the halyard for the sail on Moira a 3-to-1 system, and with the mast being 7 meters tall, that means that the halyard is over 20 meters long. So the practical junk rig book gives a very good description of how to create a rigging warrant, which essentially is a grid of showing all the different sizes and types of rope that you need to rig the boat, and also the quantities. And the first stage of this is to use the scale drawing of the boat, which I'd had already, and to draw on it one by one every line, every piece of rope that's needed, both with the sail close hauled and with the sail out at 90 degrees as if sailing downwind. And from this you can calculate all your cordage needs, and I'm sure it's a very familiar process for anybody involved in boat building and yacht design and so on, but for me it was the first time, and made my brain ache, but it was a fascinating thing to go through and to understand the scientific process, if you like. This was the final outcome of my rigging warrant, showing the names of all the different lines, the size of line and the length that I would need, and then I did lots of internet searching to get good prices, and that's what I came up with, and it worked out fairly well. I had to trim 1 or 2 of the lines down, but I don't think I was too short in any of them. So that's the end of this video. The third and final video will be showing how I made the mast step and mast partners, and also how I converted the companionway from the traditional sliding hatch and washboards to this design of using a deck hatch and making a waterproof companionway. So thanks for watching. Hope it's been interesting, and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.